So hi, thank you for having me today. I'm going to talk about the PreVenture. It's a personality-targeted intervention that was developed in our group and in Canada and also UK. So it's a selective kind of intervention, so I'll go to more details. So why it's important to address substance use at early ages? As you see, there are many reports around the world that shows that the efforts to reduce the rates of substance use has not been very successful around the world, and the rates of abuse has not been changed that much in adolescent and has been actually very stable over the time and over the past 12 years, as you see here. And the fact that many adolescents start using alcohol and drugs at early ages reduce their chance to develop healthy relationship, reduce their chance to develop healthy coping behaviors at an age that is actually very important for this matter. And so when they start using alcohol and drugs at earlier ages, all the relationship kind of develop around this behavior. This is the report by the CASA, and I would like to highlight this comment from them that address that it's not the rate of alcohol or substance use that is important now. It's the bigger issue is the increase in rates of binge drinking, in rates of accidents, overdose, and also problems related to alcohol and substance use. So there have been many approaches for addressing the substance use and addiction problem. And so at the top of this triangle, as you see, there is treatment and treatment. For someone who gets the treatment, there is actually a small portion of the population who get the treatment, and usually there is this comment that also they go through a decade of harm before they start to receive the treatment. So, and actually, even for substance users and patients with substance use problem, when it comes to a pathological state, there is still a small portion of them who can receive the treatment. And I think you know all about the failure in treatments and relapse and all those problems. And then, but these efforts inspired a lot of other interventions that are indicated intervention, and it tries to actually address the problem at an earlier ages, and for those who are still called substance abusers, who are using substances, but it's not at a very problematic state yet. One of good examples for this is the brief motivational interventions for heavy drinkers. It has shown that it has a moderate effects on reducing alcohol use in this population, but the effect is something around 6 to 10 months. And at the very bottom is the universal approach. We just had nice talks about the universal approach. It assumes that everyone, especially during adolescence, is kind of at a level of risk. So everyone is a little at risk. So we try to transfer them knowledge about the adverse outcome of the substance use, also transfer skills to children, to families, to community. It usually targets parents, children, and at some level the whole community. But for a program to be adequate for everyone, the information and the skills has to be very generic. So there is this doubt that they actually target and can address the problem in adolescent and youth who mostly need it, and they are the high-risk groups, and those who have already started using alcohol and drugs. There are evidence-based programs like the life skill training program, good behavior program, and they have been shown that if they are implemented with high fidelity, the way that they have to be delivered, they produce a mild to moderate effect. But again, the outcome is not very long-term. That brings us to the selective area, which PreVenture is categorized as a selective program. Selective programs, they have been used in the field of violence for many decades, for many years. It's around something around 4 decades that there have been selective interventions for youth with violent behavior. And what they have not been used much for reducing substance use. The important thing about the selective intervention is that they try to target a special group, the group that are at the highest risk of developing behavior. So they are more targeted, and because they are more targeted, they are tailored to be more targeted, people can connect better to them. So it's more engaging for people who receive them because it's based on the behavior or ideological background they share. So this is a longitudinal study. It's a 12-year follow-up of youth. And it shows the usual suspects in developing alcohol abuse and dependence in adolescence. So as you see, starting at younger age, being male, being white, being unmarried, high school dropout, and other things have a very strong relationship for developing alcohol abuse and alcohol dependence. At the very bottom, you see the antisocial behavior at low and moderate or more severe level. And as you see, antisocial behavior or antisocial traits are something around twofold, are related to something around twofold increase in using alcohol abuse and dependence. And at a more severe level, it's related to something around 3 to 4.5-fold increase in the use of developing actually alcohol abuse and alcohol dependence over the time. So the child temperament or traits can be a very good predictor of who is going to develop a problem with substance use. It's also a report by Surgeon General report on alcohol, drug, and health that also addressed the early initiation of substance use, early and persistent problem behavior, traits like rebelliousness are also associated with adolescent and young adulthood substance use. This is a paper that was published by our group and other colleagues from Europe. This is a paper that follows 2,200 adolescents in 4 countries in Europe, and they started to measure these kids when they were 14, and now I think they are something around 21. So every year they go through this exhausting measurement. They give blood to test their DNA. They go through the functional and structural brain imaging, and they do these personality and cognitive measures. And so the purpose was that to see what traits or what factors can predict the use of alcohol and other substances over the time. This is called Imagine study. You can see more information about this, but this is a good paper published a few years ago in Nature. And here, using a big data machine learning process, they on the left-hand side, they extracted who will develop binge drinking at age of 14, and who will develop binge drinking at the age of 16. So, and as you see, a number of factors involved: genetic factors, biological factors, and personality factors, family history, and all of this. I would like to grab your attention to the personality factors. And as you see, a number of personality factors are related to developing binge drinking at both ages at 14 and 16. Again, here are the number of tables that show that while each domain measurement is associated with a high risk of developing binge drinking and alcohol use, each one of them by itself it can be a good predictor of who will develop a problem with alcohol in long term. And a good point about using personality traits are that they are not only a robust risk factor for developing substance use, they also very inexpensive to use and can predict the risk of substance use and also other mental health problems very good. So this is a questionnaire that we use and also has been used in the same study. It's as short as 23 items, and it identifies 4 personality risk factors, and it's very user-friendly. Both adolescents and adults can simply self-report on it, and so it recognize 4 dimensions: anxiety sensitivity, which is a tendency to showing a stronger reaction related to anxiety, both physically, emotionally, and cognitively; and hopelessness, which is a tendency to depressed mood; impulsivity, which is a tendency to act without proper thinking; and sensation seeking, which is a tendency to act impulsive, but just in the situation that a revolve is involved. So it's basically different from the impulsivity. Sensation seekers are not basically impulsive. They are actually very inhibited in certain situations, and they are better than general population in working memory, for example, in some aspects of intelligence, but they get very impulsive when a reward is involved. And so the questionnaire has a very good internal consistency, concurrent validity, and it has a good incremental validity, which means above and under other questionnaires, like, for example, NEO, we have shown that it has a better power to predict substance use and alcohol use in adolescents and also adults. One of our papers shows that in adolescents who were assessed by this questionnaire, it has a successful rate of predicting of substance use in adolescents. It's something over 90% success rate. And it has been also translated in many languages and validated in many countries. And just one other thing is that imagine that it's self-report, that it means this is adolescents who are reporting us about the risk without actually talking about the risk. So this is also an important factor. So this is a complicated slide. I just want you to take home this message. At the right-hand side of the table, on top, this tells you that how we select high-risk kids. We select high-risk kids based on their score on SERPs, and if they score 1 standard deviation above their mean of population, which is usually the mean of their school, they are high risk for the substance use. And if you do the math, it results to 45% of the whole population of adolescents. And so, as you see, it's associated with something around 70 to 80% of the problems in the left-hand side, like drinking problems, smoking, drug use, depression, emotion problem, conduct problem, and hyperactivity problem. And in the bottom, you see that these traits are very specific. So, for example, high hopelessness is associated with a high tendency or showing depression symptoms. Anxiety sensitivity is associated with more emotional problem. And high impulsivity is associated with conduct problem. And one important thing and very interesting thing about sensation seeking is that it's a good predictor of binge drinking, early initiation, and development of alcohol dependence. But these are not the people that you see in general psychiatric clinics. So sensation seeking is not necessarily associated with other types of psychiatric problems or mental health problems, but it's a very good predictor of problem with alcohol. And it's a novel part of the, also a novel part of the intervention because it also targets this very special group. And this is also from the same Imagine study that shows how specific these personality traits are. For example, impulsivity assessed at age 14 is associated with conduct problems at age 16 and 16, 17. But as you see, there are very specific cognitive pathways and motivational pathways for each one of these traits. For example, for impulsivity, a poor responsive inhibition is a very good mediator. It shows that those who are rated high in impulsivity can have this tendency to not stop a behavior when they are asked for. So it was assessed with a go-no-go task or response inhibition task when they were under the functional MRI. So they were presented with this task and the brain response were recorded. And it shows that it clearly showed that relationship and also specific brain activations around the prefrontal cortex. The same thing for sensation seeking. It can when it's assessed by self-report at age of 14, it predicted substance misuse at age of 16 and 17. And with brain imaging measurement, it's a good mediating pathway was found for reward-induced impulsivity. So this is the paper. If you want to know more about the this have a lot of biological aspect, but it's I encourage you to read it. It's a very interesting paper to read. And again, this point to the specificity. For example, impulsivity has been shown within the same studies that is a common risk factor for substance use as well as other externalizing problems like ADHD and conduct problem. But sensation seeking is very unique to substance use and it doesn't share the risk with other problems. This gives you an overview of of the theoretical background of the intervention and how we actually designed it. So each part of it, this diagram has been tested in different studies. And as you know, personality factors not only shows the risk for substance use, but they also show the motivational and cognitive profile that mediate that relationship. For example, someone with a high impulsivity uses because they have poor response inhibition and emotional reactivity. On the other hand, someone high in hopelessness uses because of the negative affect regulation and to relieve those negative emotions. And also it tells us about the substances of choice, what drugs they have the most tendency to use. And for impulsive kids, it's mostly a stimulant. It's also other drugs, but stimulants are very particularly relevant. But for hopeless people, it's more sedative drugs. And it also tells us about the co-occurring disorders. As you see, these are the disorders that are mostly related to the three of the four traits we discussed. And this just talks more about the the combination of risks. So the personality-targeted interventions was developed originally by Dr. Patricia Conrad in Canada, and then the efficacy of it has been tested around the world in some different countries. It's very short when it's used for adolescent. It's also usable for and has been used for adults with anxiety problem and substance use problem. But when it's used for adolescent, we usually do 2 90-minute group sessions, and it's a school-based. And it's selective in that we only target those students who are high in those 4 personality traits, and these are 45% of the population. And they receive the intervention in personality-specific groups, so we don't mix them. Impulsive kids have their group together. Kids with anxiety sensitivity have their groups together. And about the content, it has a strong psychoeducational components, has a strong motivational components. Motivational interviewing techniques are used to do the goal setting for adolescents, and it has a very strong cognitive behavioral component, which have been used from different cognitive behavioral techniques, but all the intervention and delivery of it is around the personality. So there is just over the 2 sessions, there is just one mention of substance use. So it's about different types of problematic coping behaviors. And when we go to schools, it's presented in a very positive way. So a student and parents and a school, what they hear is that there are coping skills workshops that talks about personality, that try to teach students the ways that they can challenge through their personality and improve their skills and coping behavior. It's selective, as I said. We select the students. It's not general to the general public. And when we go to a school, the whole school receives a SERP questionnaire, and we get back after 4 or 5 months, and we invite the students who were higher in the traits. As I said, 1 standard deviation above the mean of a school, to come to the intervention workshops. And as we said, we usually present it in a way that we are going to talk about their dominant way of responding to the world, which is their dominant personality trait. So it has been, for any intervention to be effective, it has to be evidence-based. So it has to be tested in controlled trials, controlled randomized trials. And for PreVenture, the phase 1 was the proof of concept that happened in Canada, in British Columbia and Nova Scotia in 2000. And it measured the outcome of students after 4 months. The next step was the efficacy, which was the PreVenture, which we got the name of the intervention from this trial. It happened in London, UK, and involved 20 schools, and also we assessed the outcome after 2 years. And then phase 3 was the adventure, which we added other outcomes, other problematic outcomes like symptoms, different symptoms, and again happened in UK, in London, and measured the students again after 2 years after the delivery of the program. And phase 4 and 5, PreVenture, which is the one that we are doing currently in Montreal, involved 4,000 students. We recruited them when they were 12. They are 17 now. So the study is at its 5th year, and it's getting completed by the end of this year. And then we have started the intervention this year, which also involves 5,000 more students. And we added more components for special target groups. So the efficacy has been tested in and completed in 8 randomized controlled trials around the world. 4 in Canada, 2 in UK, 1 in Netherlands, 1 in Czech Republic, just finished, and 1 in Australia. And also there is going to be, as I said, there are 2 other trials in Canada. There is 1 new trial in Mexico starting this year, 1 in Sri Lanka, and 2 other cohorts are getting intervention in Australia in 2018. This is a very good paper that actually summarizes these 8 trials and give the information. And as you see, when the trial was implemented in the way I said, we get a D cohen of something around 47, which is a moderate effect on the onset of alcohol, the drinking frequency, binge drinking, substance use, and specifically the growth and development of substance use, and problems related to substance use. And the outcome tend to remain over a 3 years measurement, which was the CAP study in Australia, for example. This is a sample, an example of how we do the our RCT. So we invite all the, this is from the PreVenture in London, and as I said, it involved something around 20 schools. And we invited over 5,000 students to participate. And what we do is to get a passive consent. In that, we ask the students if they want to participate in a study, and they provide assent. But what we do with parents is that we don't go directly to them. We send them comprehensive information about the study, about the intervention, and if somebody doesn't want their kids to be involved in the study, they let us know. In this way, we get a very good rate of 95% of a student to participate. And so 45% of the students are rated as high risk, and in the way that I explained, and usually 85% on average in our study of the students sign up for the program. And when we follow up with them, when you go through the consent that I said, the way that we do the consent and everything, and promoting the program in the school and the community, we get a very good rate of 82% follow-up for kids. For example, from that trial, it's something more related to a more problematic part of the continuum. When you see there is a 30% reduction in high-risk kids who receive the intervention in surviving as a non-cannabis user. So these high-risk kids who has never used the cannabis remain non-users at the end of trial, which is after 2 years. And a better rate for staying non-cocaine user, something around 80% reduction for kids who receive the intervention. Then we decided to see if the intervention actually can be effective in a more real-life situation. if the intervention has the same effectiveness, if it's delivered by teacher and a school staff, the same effectiveness as it's delivered by us and our trained group. So we train teachers and the school staff in London to deliver the program. And so what we do, we usually do a 2-3 days workshop with them, and we go through the theoretical background, the screening using SERPs, doing the basic principles of counseling and psychology using CBT and motivational interviewing, and talk about tailoring interventions for personality. And then most of the time we do 3 hours of supervised practice running group. We supervise them to run the group for adolescents. And we provide them with the therapist manuals, and each students who are involved in the intervention also receive a manual, which is a very specific manual, because for each trait we have separate manuals, and in each city that it has been used, we culturally adapt it for the same city, so and the language also. So it's a very important part of the interventions that the manuals used by the students are very, they can really relate to them. And so the results showed that if you see, look at the odds ratio in the right-hand side, the results showed that the odds ratio, as you see, are not very different. So teachers can, and school staff can deliver the program and get the result the same as clinician and trained personnel of our lab. Adventure is the one delivered by a school staff. The same thing for cannabis use. So they were also successful in reducing the cannabis use in a period of 2 years, the same as the research staff. Gee, Tommy, I would be lost without your constant peer pressure, she says, and she holds her hands and smokes one of her cigarettes. So then we wanted to see what it has for low-risk kids who doesn't receive any intervention, but they are simply in the same school with high-risk students who receive this intervention. So in this graph, I want you to focus on the red circles. So these are in the highest and more problematic part of the continuum of using substances: binge drinking, problematic drinking, and quantity of drinking. And as you see on the top, those are high-risk kids who have not received the intervention. And then below them, there are high-risk kids who have received the information. And you see over a 2 years follow-up, they have been protected by the intervention somehow. And below them are the low-risk kids who were anyways not much at risk of doing very high-risk substance use. But what is important here is on the lowest risk part, which is the frequency of alcohol use. And as you see, at the end of the trials, in the schools who have not received the intervention, the low-risk kids just act like the high-risk kids. So in schools who received the intervention, even the high-risk kids were protected for the lowest risk outcome, like the frequency of drinking, while the peer pressure had their effect in their schools who didn't receive the intervention. And also, we had very good results for other symptoms, psychiatric symptoms, delivering the intervention for high-risk kids. Also is associated with 20 to 25% reduction in symptoms of depression, suicide ideation, anxiety, panic attacks, and conduct problems in a 2 years follow-up. So this is another outcome of the intervention. And then this is the Australian CAP trial who followed students for 3 years. And they compared PreVenture with a universal approach that they had for many years. It's called Climate. And they deliver it to students, both interventions, a combination of both, and the group who didn't receive any intervention. And as you see, PreVenture, that was only delivered to less than half of the students, had the same outcome as the universal effect. And what is interesting, it had better outcome when it comes to the harms related to using alcohol. And also, does PreVenture work for students with pre-existing diagnosis? Children who have symptoms of ADHD or conduct problems at the beginning of the trial. And we see they actually respond very well. So for an adolescent who is high risk and also has symptoms of ADHD and conduct problem, receiving intervention reduced their risk in a good extent compared to those who were not receiving that. So after we deliver the intervention, we ask every student one thing that they liked mostly about the program and one thing that they didn't like about the program. And this is the data from the students around the world. So it's rarely that we get some answer like this from adolescents about any program. The reaction is usually very positive. They like the sharing of experience. They like helping each other. They like the learning part and discussion and other things. And one thing they didn't like, it's mostly we get nothing. So they like it a lot, and so some even has this that it's very short. We want it to be continued. And we asked them the most important thing they learned. So it's thoughts, which points to the cognitive part of the intervention that actually works, the actions, setting goals, the coping behavior. And it has shown that when the students report something that, like that, it's associated with a 12 to 15% increase in the effectiveness of intervention. So when they have a positive aspect to a program. And why do so many students wanted to take part in the program? We asked them, and coming from our experience, is that we have a very strong youth and community engagement. We regularly invite the schools and talk for them about different things, our outcomes. The manuals are culturally and developmentally validated, so we ask people in children and adolescent literature to read the manuals and let us know how they feel. We ask students themselves to read the manuals and give us feedback. The adaptation also is very well done for when changing the language. And it's based on positive psychology, resilience building, and it's focused on skills rather than the negative outcomes. So it's very positive for youth. And it's very personalized. Even the sceneries that we have in the manuals from the same city students live in. So like in Montreal, we have the sceneries from Montreal. In London, we have this, in the back of the page, we have the sceneries from London. And it's brief. They like it because it's brief. And also, I have a link to a YouTube video from our adolescent. We use adolescent. We ask them, invite them to come and help us to promote the program. So you can go also to our web page of our lab and see, for example, the videos that we have for our new trials. So what is PreVenture in short? It's a 2 90-minute workshop when it's done at the schools. It's CBT motivational interviewing skills, involve a lot of focus on personality and tries to understand, help youth to understand their personality style and how it leads to certain emotional and behavioral reactions. And it's a group-based, as I said, specific to 4 personal profile. And in a conclusion, these interventions and interventions that target specific groups of people and a specific personality and cognitive risk factors appear to be effective in reducing and delaying onset of substance use, and also concurrently reduce the risk of other internalizing and externalizing problems. And the outcome remains up to 3 years. And also intervention are effective when delivered as a prevention strategy, early intervention strategy, or brief intervention for substance misuse, also with adults. I didn't present anything on adults here because most of our trials has been done with a preventive purpose, but we had also one trial with patients with anxiety disorder, and also another one with adults with substance use problem. And it's group and individual format, can be in group and individual format. It's face-to-face, and also has been distance delivered in a specific trial. And also both mental health professional and educational profession, school personnel can deliver it and be successful. And this is also the reference to a New York Times paper that summarized the intervention for public. And this is our group. I would like to acknowledge all of our group members, Dr. Patricia Conrad, who has been developing the program and testing it in different trials, all the students, scientists, and everyone who have been involved in testing the efficacy of the program over the past 15 years. And this is information, more information, our lab address, and our emails for further information. Thank you.
Hanie Edalati Montreali ülikoolist, Kanadast. Kas on kellelgi mõni küsimus? Jaa, palun.
Ma vist räägin inglise keeles. I'm going to speak in English so you can answer straight away. I think the first question everyone in this room has is, when can we see this in Estonia?
It's not depending on me to comment on that, but I really hope that it happens.
Yeah, I do as well. I wanted to comment that if I looked at the, symptoms and looked back on my school years and matched them with my class and my classmates, personalities, I could really see a resemblance them at the age of 14 and them now, for instance. So I think your research really holds, and I can personally see, it's accurate in my opinion.
No Joosep kiidab ja leiab ühiseid jooni. Aga mina siiski tahaksin küsida, et Hanie, te olete olnud siin terve päev otsa ja kuulanud erinevaid, igaks juhuks, te olete kuulanud, nii, ma loodan, et nüüd on kuulda, et te olete, aitäh selle ettekande eest, te olete päev otsa kuulnud siinseid meie probleeme, neid ettekandeid. Mis on teie 3 nõuannet meile, kuidas me kohe praegu või mida me siin saaksime muuta või paremaks teha teie kogemuse järgi?
I think the most important thing is early intervention, I would say, and I think using more targeted approaches can help, because it has been shown that for example, the universal approaches can be more effective, I think, in low-risk students, but for the higher-risk students, they're simply not working. So I think more targeted interventions are needed and more selective interventions, and if it happens at an earlier ages, before the vulnerability to these problems actually becomes more severe and more problematic. So then we have to go through more serious, more expensive interventions to be able to address the problem in individuals.
ja ma küsin ühe küsimuse veel, ma küsin selle küsimuse ikkagi eesti keeles.
Sorry.
Mis on teie hinnang sellele, mida te kuulsite? Et on kas midagi, mis teile nagu eriti silma jäi või mille üle eest te meid tahate väga kiita või mis te näete, et meil on nagu väga halvasti?
It's very hard to comment, actually. So I think there is a very good estimation of the problem, and there are good interventions going on, but my understanding is that they are not enough, and it's more thing needed to address the problem.
Väga tore.
I have a question as well.
Yeah.
I think many of you are interested in what age group were the kids that participated in your studies. There are different studies, but could you elaborate on that, perhaps?
It's mostly, I would say, the high school students, so we don't go to primary schools. And the thing is that we try to start in our own intervention trials in Montreal. We start at around 12, 11-ish, and not younger than that, because the content of the intervention is not yet, because kids at younger age don't have the cognitive ability to actually to go through the cognitive behavioral therapy and those stuff. And as you see, even with the cognitive therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy usually targets the older ages. But I think 12 is a very good age, because many students has not started using alcohols yet at that age. But some other trials, like the one in the UK, start assessing adolescents when they were 14. And so they have to also include the first age of alcohol use as a risk factor. So what they did was that they had adolescents who were high on the risk of a personality, and also they included the use of alcohol. I would say like 14, 15 is kind of late if you want to be completely preventive. 12 is a very good age.
Mm-hmm. Just to clarify, for us, high school is like 16.
Oh, okay.
So 12 is like
middle
sixth
school?
grade?
Okay.
Yeah,
Sixth,
for us.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I had another question. We talked about it yesterday as well. How did you get the schools to cooperate or to come with you?
As I said, we have a very good team, and we do a lot of promoting programs for introducing the intervention to the schools. So now it's well known by the schools, and like for the other trials, we can also go to the same schools and ask a new cohort to join the program. And we try to do knowledge translation stuff, for example. Every year we have, sometimes more than once a year, we have this evening event, which we invite the school principals, the school staff to come, and we provide them with the information about the results of the study, and also different aspects. So, for example, a few months ago, we had an event on suicide risk and suicide behavior in adolescents, and we provided schools with the information on the effectiveness of the PreVenture program on reducing the suicidal behavior and suicidal ideation. And I think one other important thing is that is the way that the program works. So it's not necessarily focused on substance use. And Schools actually like it that it also helps to reduce the school dropout, to increase the academic outcome, and also the problems that are related to using alcohol. For example, one of the behaviors that we assess as a problematic outcome of alcohol is skipping the school because of using alcohol, or not being sober in a class, and drunk driving, and stuff like that. So this is, I think, the component that schools really like, and also their involvement in the process.